Hey guys, Aaron Cybertron Zhang here, and today I'm back with another episode of Road to Ranked where I climb the online series 11 ladder and provide live commentary as I go. Today we're trying out a super fun team featuring Citrus Berry RESHIRAM as well as Gigantamax Life Orb Blastoise. This was built by a player called Xenoblade Hero who was actually able to get top 8 at a online grassroots event organized by Victory Road a couple of weeks ago. So huge shout outs to them for the team, rental, pace, and team report. Courtesy of them are all in the description below. Please go check out that team report because it has really good insight in how the team was actually constructed and gives deep insight into all the EV spreads individually. So yeah, go check all that good stuff out linked in the description below, as well as Xenoblade Hero's Twitter. So, why would you use RESHIRAM in Series 11? Well, first of all, it has a very good matchup, actually, into Zacian, which is the most common restricted Pokemon. Zacian can't really deal that much damage to RESHIRAM, whereas RESHIRAM can one-shot it with Blue Flare. And with the Citrus Berry, you can actually tank like 3 Sacred Swords from Zacian, which I think is super, super cool. RESHIRAM also has a really positive matchup into a lot of common non-restricted Pokemon like Regieleki and Rillaboom, for example. So, RESHIRAM has a lot of value in being able to just one-shot a lot of common Pokemon in the format. What's interesting about this team is that normally I think when people see RESHIRAM, they assume it's Life Orb or even Assault Vest, and they also assume that it's going to be one of the primary Dynamax options on the team that it's on. With this team, you actually have multiple max options, and Thundurus, Landorus, and Blastoise are all actually better max options, I'd say, than RESHIRAM in general. The main reason for that is because RESHIRAM actually can really hold its own even without Dynamax, whereas like the Thundurus, the Landorus, and Blastoise with the spreads and the movesets that you're running are all like substantially weaker if you don't end up maxing any of those Pokemon. So as a result, like Grimmsnarl, Rillaboom, RESHIRAM, you can always really bring comfortably, and you maybe ideally want to fill out a fourth with Blastoise, Landorus, or Thundurus. But of course, there are many scenarios in which you bring a combo of like Thundurus, Landorus, and Blastoise, like 2 of the 3, maybe even 3 of the 3, depending on the team matchup. But point being here is that like Grimm and Rillaboom aren't going to be max options, and so they're generally reliable. One thing you might want to make sure you do is like not bring every single Pokemon that likes maxing, right? If you went like Thundurus, Landorus, Blastoise, RESHIRAM, it gets a little bit awkward after your Dynamax because suddenly you're left with all these Pokemon that want to max but can't. So yeah. RESHIRAM with Citrus here is really nice, and yeah, like this moveset is relatively standard, but the idea is basically to just maximize your damage output while also actually tanking some attacks. That's really supported by dual screens on the Grimmsnarl as well. So yeah, the Thundurus, Rillaboom, Landorus, Grimmsnarl, and Blastoise sets are all, nothing super surprising. Yawn on Blastoise I think is really fun because it allows you to actually utilize Blastoise outside of Gigantamax, meaning like you can lead something like Blastoise, Landorus, Blastoise, Thundurus, Blastoise, RESHIRAM, and not necessarily max Blastoise on turn 1, right? If you're able to get a Yawn off into a Pokemon that goes for a Dynamax on turn 1, that's really, really good, right? Because it means that they don't get max mileage out of their couple turns of Dynamax. So yeah, I think RESHIRAM overall is a really cool like anti-meta Pokemon, and like I mentioned, Xenoblade Hero was actually able to get top 8 in a pretty big online grassroots event with this very exact team. So huge shout outs to them once again for the team, and huge shout outs to you all as always for watching. If you enjoy, please share support by leaving a like, I'd really appreciate it. And question of the day, I want to know kind of how you like the balance between Sword and Shield and BDSP content right now. Still focus a little bit more on Sword and Shield, but every couple of days or so we've done some BDSP uploads. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, which one you prefer, and kind of the balance between the two, and let's get started. Alright, first game of the day, and it is Seismitoad. Is this the Seismitoad team that we used recently? I actually don't remember. I don't think it was, but I honestly don't fully remember. Okay. So this is super interesting because RESHIRAM's obviously pretty good against the Zacian, the Rillaboom's not bad against Tornadus, but it's quite weak into Seismitoad specifically. Blastoise is interesting here. I don't really love Thundurus, so I don't think we bring that. Grimmsnarl for screen support in general is not bad either. Like, I'm honestly thinking Grimmsnarl plus Blastoise, Rillaboom plus RESHIRAM. Does that make sense? Like, Landorus and Thundurus both seem rather weak into Seismitoad, and that's by far my opponent's best max option. You can theoretically max like Politoed, Tornadus, Rillaboom, Urshifu, but like Seismitoad is the clear standout max option for my opponent's end. So this is interesting because I think we both have a lot of Pokemon that we're scared of. For example, I obviously have Rillaboom, that can just deal with Seismitoad, but they have Zacian and Tornadus, that deals with my Rillaboom. RESHIRAM is really good into the Zacian as well, but they have Seismitoad, which is quite good into RESHIRAM. So a lot about this will be the lead in early positioning, I think. They're going to go with Rillaboom and Tornadus, okay. So that's obviously pretty strong given my Blastoise lead. I would guess they're back to our Seismitoad and Zacian. That just makes the most sense to me. So what's interesting here is I can obviously switch Blastoise out on turn 1 of this game, and then just go out into Reshiram immediately, while also setting up a Reflect. Okay, so we'll Reflect, and we'll switch Blastoise out, I think. My intention was to Dynamax the Blastoise going into this game, and I still think that's the plan, but we have to eliminate Rillaboom first, or at least force it out of the field. But if Rillaboom, you know, just stays in, even if it like clicks Fake Out in a Grimmsnarl on turn 1 or goes for a Grassy Glide, this is actually a pretty favorable trade because we get Reshiram in for free. And I don't really mind if my opponent gets Tailwind up because I think in this battle I'm just accepting that they're going to be faster than me, right? But I do have Scary Face to potentially drop their speeds in the subsequent turns, and if we have screens up, then things aren't as scary. But the key thing here is that their best answer into my Blastoise by far is going to be the Rillaboom. So I want to try to handle this early on. Whoa! Okay, who's maxing here? It could be Tornadus max. Huh. That's very interesting, okay. I wonder if they just go Fake Out and then max Airstream into the Grimmsnarl slot. I actually think that makes a ton of sense. Okay, they just opt for Glide. I get Reflect up, but I'm not sure that's worth it because Tornadus here is probably special. Yeah, they go for Max Airstream. Okay, so it's probably Life Orb Max Airstream. If I had clicked Light Screen instead. Well, I still think we're in an okay position, actually. It's not that bad. Okay, they get the Speed Boost on a Rillaboom. I got Reflect up. They're not Life Orbed. Interesting. Well, I really should go into my Blastoise here, I think. And now what's interesting is this next turn. I could just say, you know what, I got Reflect up, I'm just gonna max Blastoise anyway. And straight up just go for like a max and then Cannonade into Tornadus. But the alternative play I want to go for is just Protect here. And just Blue Flare the Rillaboom. I'm generally okay with that, even if I end up eating a max Airstream, like it's fine. They're not Life Orb, so we'll take it. But then I guess the question is, like, are you Assault Vested on Rillaboom? Okay, yeah, that doesn't do too much damage to us. And we have the Citrus Berry and Grassy Terrain Recovery working in our favor right now as well. Okay. Nice play, wow. They've got high horsepower and they double up onto the Reshiram. That's a beautiful play by them. If they're Assault Vested, I think this really causes some issues for us. So let's see. Okay, we fortunately at least don't miss Blue Flare, so that's good. Okay, that does get the one-hit KO. So, this is actually totally worth it in the end of the day, I think, because my opponent's already spent 2 turns of their Dynamax with Tornadus. I can protect the Reshiram this final turn, and then we can max Blastoise now, and then just go for G-Max Cannonade. They don't have that much good damage into Blastoise, and the other key thing is that we do have Reflect up, so that's actually Seismitoad coming in. Okay. Maybe they have a Grass-type attack, but I don't mind just going for a max here. Well, their last one should be Zacian, right? So, it might actually make more sense to intentionally leave Seismitoad around for a turn. But if their last one's Zacian, you know what? Yeah, I don't mind just cannonading to try to KO Seismitoad and then protecting with Reshiram here. And then what I can do is switch out Reshiram into Rillaboom next turn. So, yeah. This is why I didn't want to max Reshiram, because, like, they had Seismitoad, but I guess because they committed the Dynamax to Tornadus early on, Reshiram actually would have been an okay max option. I just didn't want to end up, like, max flaring into Rillaboom just for Rillaboom to, like, switch out into, like, Politoed or into Seismitoad, right? And so this is the nice thing of running Citrus Berry on the Reshiram rather than Assault Vest. Okay, they're going to go for Airstream. It's a Blastoise. They played very well so far. Like, they've read into all of my protects, but I don't mind making the safe protects right now because I don't think we lose too much, all things considered. Okay, and they will Earth Power. Perfect. Into Reshiram's Protect. Beautiful. And now we get Life Orb Cannonade off. One thing that's really nice for this endgame potentially for us is having the combination of Cannonade chip damage as well as if I go for a max Hailstorm, then the hail damage also starts chipping away. We actually get a critical hit there. I'm not sure I wanted that crit though because I actually wanted my opponent to stay in with the Seismitoad. Now it grants them a free switch in. I'm also not sure if the crit matters. Like, Seismitoad's not exactly the bulkiest Pokemon, and it's typically Life Orbed. Could see it being AV as well, though. So, yeah. Obviously a lucky crit there, but it's one in which, like, I honestly think I would have preferred to have not picked up that knockout, just so my opponent doesn't get a free switch into their Zacian. I think now what we can do... Let's see, Reflect is still up, so even if you play Rough and Hurricane into Blastoise, we should survive. So, honestly, I don't mind just going for a max Hailstorm here, knock out Tornadus, and get the Hail up, and then switch into my Rillaboom here, which then allows me to fake out Cannonade Zacian on the third turn of my Dynamax. And even if you read this or just go for a Flying type attack onto the Reshiram slot, which would make a lot of sense, right? It would cover for the Rillaboom switch in as well. Well, then Reshiram just gets to come back out, and if we knock out the Tornadus, then Reshiram should win against Zacian. So, that's one of the main purposes of Reshiram on this team. Generally gives you a favorable matchup into Zacian teams. Okay, so we're going to switch out. We're going to bring in Rillaboom. Perfect. And they protect Zacian. Great. That should be game over then, regardless of what Tornadus goes for. Unless they Hurricane... What? I did not see that coming. It's still fine. So it was actually physical Tornadus with Fly? Wow. That's a first. That is fascinating. We always get a guaranteed knockout onto Tornadus here, so I don't mind just, you know, going for Fake Out here onto Zacian and then just Hailstorming Tornadus. Because if you're in my opponent's shoes, I would go for Double Protect with Zacian right now. And even if, for example, they don't go for the double and Fly crits my Rillaboom, we're still honestly not in a bad spot. So there's Fly. That's wild. But yeah, because of Reflect, we do survive that. And the reason I went for this is because it was always a guaranteed knockout while also denying Zacian attack, right? So in the worst case scenario, what is the worst case? Like, they protect Zacian there and crit us and knock out Rillaboom. Well, the end game is still Blastoise plus Reshiram while I have Reflect up against the Zacian, right? So that actually should allow us to comfortably win the game because we can just go for Hydro Cannon and Blue Flare or even Earth Power. So, yeah. Fly Tornadus, though. Tornadus is so often special. I actually can't remember the last time I fought against physical Tornadus at all in Sword and Shield, so that is super interesting. Now, back in the day, physical Tornadus was really common. You'd run Acrobatics with Flying Gem and Defiant, and, you know, you could just potentially one-shot things. But in Sword and Shield, generally feels like Special Tornadus has been stronger, especially because there is so much Intimidate running around. Okay. Now we can just go for Hydro Cannon. And there's really no reason to... Well, terrain disappeared, right? There's really no reason to bother switching out right now. Like, when you have the Hail and G-Max Cannonade ticking down, there's just very little Zacian can do in this position. So the main thing is that my opponent's lead didn't appear to be very offensive. Now, their solution around it was to Dynamax the Tornadus, but this is why I was so, you know, focused on them having the Seismitoad as the max option, because I thought that was by far the scariest thing on their team. So the fact they maxed Tornadus was honestly a good thing for us, because they didn't get too much mileage out of it, right? They spent 3 turns essentially to pick up 1 KO, and I feel like that favors us substantially. So, yeah. Reshiram was very important here because it was able to knock out Rillaboom. It was also a solid Dynamax option, so depending on how that one turn played out, like, for example, let's say they double up into the Blastoise that turn rather than the Reshiram, then I could potentially even consider Dynamaxing Reshiram later on. But I didn't love the idea of maxing Reshiram, especially when Tornadus potentially has Rain Dance or Tailwind, and like Seismitoad in the back just scares me, especially because we don't have Assault Vest. So yeah, But Reshiram, as you can see, is really important in Team Preview because it helps me handle both Zacian and Rillaboom. And so if we're able to handle the Rillaboom, then that just paved the way for Blastoise in the late game completely. And that's why these two Pokemon synergize super, super nicely with each other. So yeah, I think what's really interesting about the Reshiram on this team is that you don't often have to Dynamax it, right? And in fact, like Thundurus, Landorus, and Blastoise are all superb max options. And so more often than not, you're not going to max the Reshiram. And it totally serves that role super, super well. Doesn't need to rely on Dynamax and is often, I wouldn't say stronger without Dynamax, but like you get a lot more mileage out of maxing Thundurus, Landorus, or Blastoise than you do out of Reshiram, just because Reshiram is still really powerful without max, whereas the other Pokemon are a lot weaker if you don't Dynamax them, especially considering their movesets. So yeah, that was a really, really fun first game, so let's keep it going. Alright, next game of the day. This is really cool. Wow, Kyogre, Gothitelle, Landorus, Porygon, Glastrier, and Marowak. Okay, immediately I'm thinking about double ally switch from both Marowak and Porygon. They don't have great water resistances or immunities, so this should probably be a Blastoise max game. Yeah, they honestly don't have great damage into Blastoise in general either, so I think I'm okay with the Grimmsnarl Blastoise lead here. We don't necessarily need a max Blastoise, right? We can also click Yawn with this. Reshiram in the back. Rillaboom's good against Kyogre, Landorus, Porygon's really bad in a Glastrier and Marowak. Thundurus is terrible against Glastrier and Marowak, so I don't think I ever bring that. Landorus is interesting because of Intimidate, but is there anything, like, can I really use this outside of Dynamax? I do have EQ and Rock Slide, as well as Fly. It's mainly the Intimidate that's interesting to me. But I actually think I'm going to go with Rillaboom here. That being said, I feel not very confident in like whatever fourth Pokemon selection I was going to make, whether it was Landorus, Rillaboom, or Thundurus, meaning that I do need to rely a little bit more on trying to win the game with just Grimmsnarl, Blastoise, and Reshiram. Not to say that Rillaboom is completely useless. Obviously, you can put on some really good damage output, but I think the one thing that works well for us here is that Blastoise isn't threatened immensely on turn 1 of the game. There's no super effective like Max Lightning, Max Overgrowth, and basically no super strong like Electric or Grass type Pokemon that scares me. But there are a lot of shenanigans that my opponent can have, right? Ally Switch on Marowak, Porygon, actually, and Gothitelle. 3 Pokemon like an Ally Switch, so that's scary. Hypnosis from Gothitelle, that's one thing to watch out for as well. We're going to go with Gothitelle and Kyogre. Okay. I mean, generally that's okay. Just worried about, like, max. How much speed investment does this Blastoise have again? I'm double checking. That's 116 speed EVs. I would think we outspeed them then. If I were my opponent, I would probably just double up on a Grim turn 1, but that's not a bad trade for us if I end up one-shotting Gothitelle here, because then I can just bring in Rillaboom. So I think I am just going to max go for the Cannonade. I mean, the downside there is, like, Kyogre doesn't take any residual damage from Cannonade, and so we would essentially waste 1 turn of chip damage from it, but if it means knocking out Gothitelle, I think that's pretty good. One thing I could have done... I actually don't remember what speed stat Gothitelle if your max speed hits exactly, so that's what I'm primarily worried about at the moment. But they go for Fake Out. Okay, as long as it's not Hypnosis, I think this is a totally favorable trade on turn 1. And Grimmsnarl doesn't even get KO there. That's amazing. Because it means we get one of our 2 screens up, and my opponent's team is rather physical. Right? It generally... Okay, it's Focus Sash Ground. Okay, so then we actually do get mileage out of Cannonade, fortunately. Is that Choice Scarf on the Kyogre then? That would make the most sense. Given that you did not knock out the Grimmsnarl. But this is amazing, because now it means, yeah, I get a screen up. And I'm probably going to go for Reflect because my opponent's physical Pokemon are Glastrier, Marowak. Those are both, I think, primary max options for my opponent. So, yeah, this is a really good turn 1, I would say. And even if we had fainted there, it wouldn't have been too bad, because if I faint there, you just give me a free switch and a Rillaboom, and then I can just Grassy Glide. So if us fainting there actually may have been even beneficial. But I think going for Reflect here and then just going for Cannonade into Glastrier is super safe. And so now I'm really, really glad I brought Rillaboom in the back, right? Because it is just a very clear, like, definitive answer to beat Kyogre, which is super good. We've got RESHIRAM as well, which is interesting, mainly because the rain is up, but maybe they changed the weather via max Hailstorm, although Hailstorming this turn wouldn't really make any sense. You'd rather go for like a max Quake for a special defense boost. But either way, I think Cannonade in rain with Life Orb coming from Hydro Cannon should do a ton of damage to Glastrier. You could also max Kyogre, which would actually be pretty interesting. Max Kyogre, if you have max Lightning, would actually be a really powerful play, but it is just Glastrier maxing. I was like wondering whether or not a max Lightning would one-shot Blastoise from the range that we're at, and I think it's close, but there is some like HP investment on this Blastoise, I think, so will not have been the end of the world, but getting a Reflect up at this point in the game is very, very nice for us. Just go for another Water Spout. Yep, no problem. My main question is, I think they're probably Assault Vest on Glastrier, so let's see how well they take this. Do we do more than 50%? No, we don't. You are definitely Assault Vest then. Oh, that actually could be a problem as they max Quake into me. 170 down to 107, so I took 63 damage there. Okay, well, it's pretty easy to just bring Rillaboom out right now. Now, I do have Grassy Seed and Wood Hammer on this Pokemon. So, the play I'm actually thinking of, because I'm fairly confident that's Choice Scarf Kyogre, the play I'm thinking of is actually doubling up into Glastrier. I guess the only fear is if it actually somehow survives, but I want to go for Wood Hammer and the Cannonade. They do have a special defense boost, but I think with Wood Hammer, it should just be enough damage to KO. It'll be kind of close. I could see Glastrier hanging out with the sliver of HP. Okay, perfect. They switch out there. That could be... It's actually Porygon coming in. I was actually expecting the Marowak. But Porygon makes sense. Obviously, Marowak's not super strong into our team comp here. So let's see if we get the knockout here. If we do, the game should just be over. But if not, they actually probably just win the game with the Hailstorm. But that looks like more than enough. Was that a crit? No. Okay, here's Wood Hammer. Beautiful. Okay, that was a little bit scary. If it wasn't that play, then the other play I'd contemplate was going for Grassy Glide and Cannonade into the Kyogre slot. But that actually wouldn't have worked out. We'd knock out Porygon, but then they just get a free switch him back into Kyogre. And then they'd probably max Hailstorm to one-shot my Rillaboom. And then they'd actually probably just win the game from there, which is really scary. But now we should be in a pretty good spot. Blastoise was by far the MVP of this one. RESHIRAM was interesting. Mainly because, like, depending on how the early game went, RESHIRAM could have been very good into Glastrier as well as, well, not as good into Marowak, I suppose. But, RESHIRAM could be a max option. But we had to play flexible, right? And I think that's the fun thing about this team. Like, RESHIRAM can make for a good max option, but you don't necessarily always need to. In fact, more often than not, you're not going to. So we can just Grassy Glide Kyogre here. And I don't mind going for a Yawn onto the Porygon slot. Perfect. There's Glide. This should just one-shot Kyogre. Beautiful. Yeah, eliminating Gothitelle on turn 1 was so essential. And the main thing here is, like, we could lead Blastoise with near full confidence because they had very little, super strong offense into it on turn 1 of this game. And they just foul play Rillaboom. Cool. So we actually don't even end up bringing a restricted in this one. That's pretty neat. Okay. Everyone heals a little bit. Yeah, I think Blastoise and RESHIRAM... I mean, Blastoise was really good in Series 8. I'm trying to remember like how much play it saw relative to Venusaur. I felt like Venusaur was just so good in that format, in Charizard as well. So we can just Wood Hammer now and go for Hydro Cannon. Cool. I'm trying to think, like, I mean, did I ever have a position where bringing RESHIRAM was correct early on in this game? Not really. If I lead RESHIRAM, that's really bad for us. I think Grimmsnarl Blastoise, there was just like no lead my opponent could use to beat that. Because once again, like, there was nothing that really tremendously threatened Blastoise in that game. So that just felt like a match in which, like, we had a lead that, like, my opponent had very few answers into. Actually, if they one-shot Grimmsnarl on turn 1 with Water Spout, then it's actually not a bad spot for them. Because then I bring out Rillaboom, they bring out Glastrier, I would Glide into the Kyogre slot, they maybe switch that out into Porygon. I would Cannonade into the Glastrier, Glastrier survives it, they Hailstorm Rillaboom, Rillaboom gets knocked out, I bring out RESHIRAM. So then I guess the question is whether or not like a blue flare into a Cannonade would KO. It would actually get really tricky. So Actually, yeah, just Grimmsnarl surviving turn 1 of the game made a huge difference. Part of what made this game more difficult was that they had Assault Vest on the Calyrex, because if you're not AV, then I can just like go for 2 Cannonades to KO you, and then maybe like a Blue Flare or Draco Meteor if that's not enough. But because of the AV, even 2 Cannonades and a Blue Flare probably wasn't going to be enough, especially when you add like a special defense boost from Max Quake. So yeah, I actually think just Grimmsnarl surviving turn 1 of the game alone made a huge difference in the grand scheme of things. Because if not, then I'd bring out Rillaboom. I guess there's a world in which I protect the Rillaboom and then just go for a Cannonade into the Glastrier slot to scout out for it. So yeah, that would actually probably be the right play, but the game would be a lot harder. Either way, I've rambled on for a bunch, so let's look for another game. Third match here, and Palkia. Okay, cool. After playing against so many Zacians with the Zamazenta team, I just get excited playing any other restricted Pokemon. So, Palkia. Palkia against Reshiram. What an interesting matchup. They have Clefairy, so Follow Me, Sing, Ally Switch are all support moves we have to respect. Helping Hand. Cinderace can max Airstream to give speed boosts. Palkia can Trick Room. I don't mind leading Grimmsnarl here because I feel like our ability to get screens up is decent. Grim Blastoise has to be careful because they could obviously lead Regieleki. I don't like leading Thundurus here because of the Glastrier and because of the Trick Room threat on their end. I don't love this matchup, honestly. I think the previous games we had pretty good matchups, but this one I would favor my opponent. Doesn't mean it's unwinnable, but it makes Team Preview more difficult. I actually think leading Landorus is pretty interesting here. Obviously want Reshiram. I don't bring Thundurus. So that's between Rillaboom and Blastoise. But if I'm bringing Landorus, can I really bring Blastoise? This one's interesting. I ended up bringing 3 Pokemon that can max in Reshiram, Landorus, and Blastoise. And the thing is that, like, either Landorus or Blastoise get considerably weaker because, like, only one of them can Dynamax, so whatever one I choose not to Dynamax is going to be in a weird spot in this game. But I didn't know how to fully play Team Preview here because I didn't love the idea of leading Blastoise if they just lead Regieleki. And they just go Clef Palkia, okay. This is where Blastoise would have been a fine lead because I could just like pressure with Yawn immediately. I wouldn't say it's terrible for us either, but I don't love it. Huh. You know what's one really interesting play I could make? If they set up Trick Room, do we think they're Trick Rooming right now? Because I could obviously like switch Lando out into Blastoise and just Light Screen. That's probably the right play here. I wanted to get fancy and like Swords Dance Landorus, Light Screen. But they probably just follow me Trick Room. That generally feels like the safest play for them. I just don't think it's worth it to like throw away Landorus potentially on turn 1 of the game. Swords Dance is fancy, but it doesn't even work out that well for us if they get Trick Room up. The play I was thinking of is like Self-Scary Face to lower my speed under Trick Room, but like that doesn't necessarily work because Clefairy can just go for a Follow Me to deter that. They actually max. Okay, I would say them maxing is very good for us because with Light Screen up, unless you go for Helping Hand into Max Geyser on Grimmsnarl, even then I'm not sure that's guaranteed a knockout. This means that we at least take turn 1 of their Dynamax decently well, and that's always a good start for us, especially if we get a Light Screen up, which they have no way to prevent right now. It is Helping Hand though, okay. Yeah, maybe it is Geyser into Grim. Helping Hand Wormwind into Blastoise would be really rough because Blastoise is the main max Pokemon I have right now. It is Geyser, so I'm curious if that goes into Landorus or Grim. It did go into a Blastoise slot, okay. Oh, very interesting. Man, do I think a Hydro Cannon and Rain KOs Clefairy here? Because the play I want to go for is like Scary Face. I could max Blastoise. They could just go for Helping Hand into max Wormwind. That's certainly a possibility. But because of Scary Face, I mean, is it really right to max Blastoise on this spot? If it means knocking out Clefairy, I actually think it's worth it. So yeah, I'm actually going to Scary Face, Max, and then Cannonade. And the main reason I think it's worth it is because even if we faint here, I can bring in the RESHIRAM. I can Scary Face the RESHIRAM or the Palkia. What's really essential is KOing Clefairy, because if I don't knock out Clefairy now, I actually think I really struggle dealing damage to it with either Landorus or the Palkia in the back. Sorry, the RESHIRAM in the back. Okay, they go for Follow Me. That's totally fine. We should survive a Max Wormwind with Light Screen being up, so that's really critical. Unfortunately, it's a waste of a Scary Face. I could have used this opportunity to set up a Reflect, but the idea here was in case they went for a Helping Hand and Wormwind, yeah, they just go for Geyser. Okay, so I wonder if Grim can survive this. Let's see. I think it'll be close. Actually, with Reina, probably not, right? Oh, no, we do survive. Oh, this Grimmsnarl set is so good. Wow, that's amazing. So now we get a Life Orb Cannonade into Clefairy. Beautiful, and that's actually just a 1-hit KO. So, once again, a little bit awkward because they do end up wasting a turn of my Cannonade in terms of residual damage, but we'll take that trade any day. And now I can even get a Reflect Up or a Scary Face into Palkia, both which are fantastic. So this Grimmsnarl EV spread is just so, so good. Okay, Lecky comes out. Ooh, do we outspeed, max speed a Lecky, even if we Scary Face them? We don't. Ugh. That's actually a really big issue. Okay, I think it's fine because I can Scary Face Palkia here to allow my RESHIRAM to outspeed it. And then just Max Guard here. And then bring in RESHIRAM in safely next turn. Yeah, I think that's okay. Unless I survive an electric type attack with Also, maybe it was better just Scary Face Lecky here. No, but I need to cover for Palkia because otherwise they can just Electro Web me, right? But the correct play there may have been to actually Scary Face Lecky because then RESHIRAM can come in and just Earth Power it, but then Lecky could just switch out and then you can just go for a Dragon type attack into RESHIRAM. Like, RESHIRAM's value right now is that Lecky can't really deal too much damage to it, right? Which is obviously valuable for us. So, let's bring out RESHIRAM now. Is there ever a world in which I bring Landorus out? No, I don't think so. Because the main thing is if I bring out Landorus, then suddenly Palkia threatens me with a 1-hit KO and I can't one-shot their Palkia. Whereas in this position, I think we have a relatively safe play, which is to... I mean, you would think their Palkia switches out or protects here, right? They don't have a switch in into Draco Meteor anymore, though. So there's two options I could go for here. The first is just the Earth Power, the Lecky slot. But I think I'm fine clicking Draco Meteor and then switching this out into Landorus, especially because we have the light screen up. So even if you like go for a Electro Web or a T-Bolt into Reshiram, that doesn't hurt. Even if you have Hyper Beam, that doesn't really hurt. What I don't want to do is throw the game away, right? Let's say I just Earth Power the Lecky slot, and Lecky protects, and then Palkia goes for like a Hail Mary Spatial Rend into my Reshiram. I kind of just lose the game there, right? So it's like... Here, even if they switch out the Palkia, well, they don't really have a safe switch-in option, right? And then it's like Landorus then is now poised for success if Palkia protects or switches out. Either of those scenarios are good for us. And they are going to switch out. Cool. So it is going to be Incineroar. Nice. And now you can see Lecky is straight up in a really weird position where it just doesn't do any damage to either of my Pokemon. Now, this next turn, Incineroar will have a Fake Out. And they just go for Protect. Okay, so yeah, they go for a relatively safe play. This is why I was always safe to Draco until the Palkia slot, though. I do think that turn, like, there was basically nothing my opponent could do other than maybe hope for a miss. My main question now is how fast is your Palkia? I don't know the answer to that. I am a little bit nervous about Palkia being, like, super, super speedy. You just protected a Lecky too. So, like, if I were my opponent, what would I do? Fake out Landorus, Volt Switch out? That would be interesting. 1 turn of Rain, 4 turns of Light Screen, last turn of Cannonade. Obviously want to be a little bit careful because I don't want to just self-EQ myself. Although with the Intimidate, I actually don't think it's a bad play right now. I am intrigued by the idea of going for Earth Power here onto Regieleki and Earthquake. Because Earthquake will still knock out both of my opponent's Pokemon while not doing that much damage to Reshiram. Yeah, they launch Fake Out into Landorus anyway. Okay. Okay, and just T-Bolt into Reshiram. Cool, that works well for us. This is one of the main reasons you want to use Reshiram in this format, right? It is so good into so many of the common Pokemon like Regieleki, Rillaboom, Zacian. Okay, so we knock the Regieleki out. We still have a couple turns of Light Screen. That's also really valuable for us. And Rain is also over with, so all of that is good news for us. Okay. I wish I had Fake Out right now, but I don't. We should right now assume their Palkia outspeeds. I'm just double checking our Reshiram, the EV spread on it. It has 140 speed EVs. So Palkia definitely could outspeed us at their max speed, which totally could be the case here. Do I think they KO with Light Screen being up into Landorus? That's one of my main questions right now. You would think I should switch out Reshiram or Protect here. I really don't know about this play. They are faster, but they Hydro Pump into the Landorus slot. Okay. It is enough for a KO, so it's going to be a 2v1, but... So I obviously could have switched the Reshiram out there that turn. Why didn't I do that? I also could have clicked Draco Meteor there, but we're at -2. Not having Fake Out here is actually super bad. I do have Yawn, which helps. I feel like their Spatial Rend still KOs us, even with Light Screen being up, unfortunately. It's 2 turns of Light Screen. So one play I could make here is to protect the Reshiram. The thing is, I haven't revealed all my moves here, right? So they actually will probably expect Fake Out, meaning I don't want to just blow a Protect. So I guess I'll just Draco Meteor and Yawn here. Them being faster is a huge issue, though, unfortunately. Yeah, they do blow their Protect. Okay. I just don't know my Palkia damage calcs onto Reshiram through Light Screen very well. It's a pretty obscure scenario. Maybe I didn't want to reveal Yawn there. Now they know I have it. So, like, one play I could go for is Protect here into Yawn. But then I need to double Protect anyway. And, like, maybe there's a chance we survive because of Light Screen. So, okay. I'll just go for the Draco here and the Ice Beam. Or, sorry, the Yawn. I don't even know if Ice Beam's a 3 KO. But they actually miss Spatial Rend. Oh, they targeted Blastoise! You know, that actually makes a lot of sense, because they're expecting to survive Draco Meteor here. Oh, okay, I'm going to do the damage calc after this game, because I'm super, super curious as to whether or not that's a guaranteed knockout. But now the game's just over. That's a really lucky dodge. So, I was thinking because Light Screen was up, we could actually survive that with Blastoise, but I'm really not 100% sure on that. Either way, now we just double Protect, guarantee that they fall asleep, and then we're good. So that's what I mean, though, right? If I had protected the Reshiram there... I just didn't feel like, especially because they ended up targeting the Blastoise, I think they were reading into the Protect there. So that's a lucky dodge, and Palkia does have the misfortune of its 2 best attacks in Spatial Rend and Hydro Pump being relatively inaccurate. If I had just switched Reshiram out into Blastoise earlier, it feels like maybe that could have been enough. But the thing is, I wanted to force it to be a 2v1 scenario in this endgame. Anyway, we never need to rely on... Yeah, at this point we can just go for 100% accurate attacks. No reason not to. Okay, they take their first turn of sleep. Yeah, I really want to do the damage calc with Spatial Rend because I have no idea, like, whether or not that was a guaranteed KO, whether it was a damage roll. In my head, I was thinking we could survive it with Light Screen being up, so... Yeah, like, I really want to know just how influential the miss mattered, because I don't know my Spatial Rend through Light Screen calcs very well. But either way, like, if they get the knockout there, they... Well, actually, I wouldn't say they win the game. Basically, they needed to hit multiple Spatial Rends in this endgame, right? and the Hydro Pump. If you miss one of Hydro Pump, Spatial Rend, like, because that's the order you need to go in, right? Hydro Pump to KO Landorus, Spatial Rend to KO Blastoise, and then Spatial Rend to KO Reshiram. So if you miss any of those, then we most likely win the game. And so, I mean, the odds are still in my opponent's favor, right? Because Spatial Rend's 90%, Hydro's 80%, so it still favors them pretty well. But the odds of you missing one of the three isn't exactly super slim. It's, you know, it's not like a crit or anything. But it's just a roll that, you know, is still more in my opponent's favor than mine. So yeah. But let's quickly look at the damage calc with Palkia into Blastoise, because I honestly have no idea how much that was supposed to do without the crit. So let's take a look. So if we look at the damage calcs, assuming Palkia has 252 special attack with Lustrous Orb, which is just by far the most common Palkia spread, then you do a minimum of 73 to 87 to Blastoise, and we actually had 74 HP, so basically, in all but one scenario, they get the knockout onto Blastoise, assuming this is their spread. Now, if for some weird reason you're not Lustrous Orb, then you're actually never guaranteed the knockout with Spatial Rend. It does 73 maximum, but I'd be very surprised if it weren't Lustrous Orb. So, what this tells me is, yeah, we got very lucky, and if they don't, if they connect that, then they most likely win the game, barring a Spatial Rend miss on the Reshiram the subsequent turn. Like I mentioned, in this endgame, my opponent needed to hit Hydro into 2 Spatial Rends consecutively. I think the odds of all 3 of those is just around like 72, 73%. So it is still significantly more in my opponent's favor, right? And so what this tells me is that, yeah, we won this game, but we had to rely on some RNG to win. And so now I want to reflect on like areas where I could have improved. First of all, the lead matchup wasn't super good, I'd say. I was thinking about leading Blastoise Grimmsnarl in this match, but the Regieleki really scared me in team preview, and so I ultimately did not go for that. I think even if they had led Regieleki, though, I could always, you know, pivot Blastoise out on turn 1 into Landorus or Reshiram, so then it's like, they'd have to lead like Regieleki plus Palkia specifically to truly scare me. So the lead didn't feel amazing. That's one area where we could have improved in. If I just led with Grimm and Blastoise, I feel like we have a very strong early game, just because they like can't deal that much damage to Blastoise, and I can just light screen into a Cannonade into Clefairy immediately. So that's opportunity number 1. Opportunity number 2 was in that end game when they, you know, went for the Spatial Rend into Blastoise. We actually had Protect on Blastoise, and that's not very common on Blastoise sets generally. I wouldn't say not very common, but it's certainly not like every Blastoise set is carrying it. So I could have actually protected Blastoise and then just Draco Meteor the Reshiram and then basically do a ton of damage into it and then be in a scenario where the subsequent turn Reshiram can only knock out one Pokemon, right? And so that makes things trickier for them. Now, that would have to be like a pretty advanced prediction to make, but it's one in which I think, like, since we were behind in that game anyway, it felt like might as well, you know, go for a big play like that. And so that's opportunity number 2. The third one is one thing I was wondering about, right? Like, how much damage does Palkia do into Reshiram with Light Screen being up? Because I thought it would basically be a guaranteed KO, especially after Landorus went down. But turns out it actually never picks up the knockout onto our Reshiram if Light Screen is up. You do 129 and 153, and we had 160 plus HP on Reshiram. So what that means is maybe I should have switched out the Landorus into Blastoise, right? Because then I would essentially get a knockout onto the Incineroar, and then force it to be a 3v1 in that position, right? Like, the only way it's not a 3v1 is if you Spatial Rend the Landorus on the Blastoise switch out, or you end up targeting Reshiram with Spatial Rend, you end up critting. But given the play my opponent made, like, yeah, if we had Earth Power the Incineroar slot, that would get the knockout, and their Hydro Pump would go into my Blastoise, so then it would be a 3v1 in that endgame, and then in that scenario, then what I could do is just click Yawn and Draco Meteor into the Reshiram, and then it looks pretty good for us. I wouldn't say it's a guaranteed win, because Reshiram is slower than Palkia, and Palkia outspeeds my entire team, so I think Palkia could actually pull off a 3v1 comeback from that situation, but the odds would have been a lot better for us, right, had I just switched out the Landorus that turn. So I didn't know this damage calc, and what I was afraid of is if Spatial Rend's a guaranteed KO onto Reshiram, I switch the Landorus out, and then they just KO the Reshiram even through Light Screen. The game's just immediately over at that point. So I didn't want to risk that because I didn't know the damage calc off the top of my head. But yeah, overall, really interesting match. I think my opponent played incredibly well, and I got obviously quite lucky to win this endgame. And but the good thing is, you know, identifying like multiple areas where we could have improved on to put ourselves in a position where we didn't need to rely on RNG. So that's why it's always good to reflect on your games, even if they're wins. Wins that have heavy luck involved, like you always want to figure out how you can play and put yourself in a position where you need to rely on that. Don't need to rely on that luck to win, right? So yeah. Anyway, that's going to be it for this one. So shout outs to Reshiram and Blastoise. Both of them were really phenomenal in today's episode. So thanks so much as always for watching. Leave a like if you enjoy. Don't forget to answer the question of the day, and I'll see you all soon. All right. Peace.